Funding for the Gone Fission Nuclear Report is provided by the Energy Communities Alliance.
Welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report, your one-stop source for all the latest news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program. Now, here's your host, Michael Butler.
Hello, and welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report. Today is Monday, August 26th, 2024. We're covering all the news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program across the country. And we thank our friends at the Energy Communities Alliance for being presenting sponsor for today's episode. ECA, Local Concerns, National Impact. Each year, the Department of Energy's Office of Environmental Management publishes a list of cleanup priorities for its sites around the country. Progress in the decades-long, multi-billion-dollar cleanup program is measured by how well these milestones are met. This week, the Gone Fission Nuclear Report joins in celebrating completion of a major cleanup goal on DOE's Oak Ridge Reservation in Tennessee. It's a comprehensive soil remediation project that DOE calls Vision 2024. This project is newsworthy because of where it is and because of its massive size and complexity. We're talking about soil remediation at the East Tennessee Technology Park. ETTP, as it's known, is the former home to the historic Oak Ridge Gaseous Diffusion Plant, or K25. As for size, over the past several years, the program has remediated more than 500,000 cubic yards of contaminated soil, clearing the way for transformation of the site into a multi-use industrial park that is becoming home to new tenants who are leading the resurgence of nuclear power and what is being called the nuclear renaissance. Much of the soil was moved a few miles to an on-site disposal facility. Some was shipped to approved out-of-state disposal sites. This soil remediation project essentially brings to a close a decades-long project to clean up the historic K25 site. During the Manhattan Project, K25 produced the enriched uranium that was needed to construct the first atomic bomb that led to the end of World War II. K25 continued its national security role during the Cold War and later became the chief source for enriched uranium needed to fuel the nation's growing fleet of commercial nuclear power plants. 4 years ago, DOE and its Oak Ridge cleanup contractor, UCOR, celebrated the completion of Vision 2020, the first ever teardown of a complete gaseous diffusion complex. 4 massive gaseous diffusion plants and more than 500 other structures were demolished in one of the largest environmental cleanup projects anywhere in the world. This week, we're joining the DOE cleanup team in celebrating the successful completion of Vision 2024. Our guest is Joanna Hardin, DOE Federal Project Director for the East Tennessee Technology Park in Oak Ridge. A note for listeners, in the interview, you'll hear Joanna refer to the acronym OREM. She's talking about the Oak Ridge Office of Environmental Management. Here's our interview. Well, our guest now is Joanna Hardin. Joanna is the Portfolio Federal Project Director for the East Tennessee Technology Park in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. ETTP is the former site of the K25 gaseous diffusion plant. And we're going to be talking today about the completion of an important cleanup milestone on the Oak Ridge Reservation. And welcome to the podcast, Joanna.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're glad you're here, and thank you for joining us. 4 years ago, DOE recognized the completion of what was called Vision 2020, which was the teardown of the first ever in the world teardown of a complete uranium enrichment complex, the gaseous diffusion facilities on the Oak Ridge Reservation. This was an unprecedented achievement and really one of the biggest environmental cleanup programs that had ever been undertaken anywhere. And it was very successful. Over 500 structures were removed from the site. And now you're celebrating Vision 2024, 4 years later. Tell us what Vision 2024 is and why it's important.
So let me step back just a little bit and explain how we've phased our cleanup program over the years. As you mentioned, we did start with taking down a lot of the contaminated or all of the contaminated facilities, and we completed that in 2020. And then we stepped into soil remediation. And so Vision 2024 is marking the completion of major soil remediation cleanup work. And the idea there is that by taking down the buildings and then moving to soil, we've been actively removing sources of groundwater contamination. So as of about 2 weeks ago, we have removed approximately over 550,000 cubic yards of soil and cleaned up, a lot of ETTP with that.
Well, Joanna, you mentioned the more than 500,000 cubic yards of soil has been remediated on the site as part of Vision 2024. Let's talk about how that happens. I know one of your partners in this process, in addition to UCOR, your cleanup contractor, are the labor unions that are involved in the skilled craftspeople who do a lot of the work on site. Can you take us through their involvement, kind of things they do, and how the soil remediation process actually works? What all you had to do to get the job finished?
I'm really glad you asked this question because the craftspeople deserve a lot of appreciation for the amount of soil that we've removed. The way that it works is we go out and we do a characterization of a site. And so we set out grids and we perform sampling in conjunction with EPA and TDEC, and we get all of their approval, and we assure everybody that we have identified all data gaps and we know precisely where we think the contamination might be. And so once we have contamination located, then we start defining the boundary of that contamination area. And so we look at how far down we think it goes, how wide it is, and we calculate a volume of soil that we think is going to be removed. And that's what we start working towards. Depending on the contaminant, sometimes that volume would expand beyond what we had originally planned. And so we just had to adapt to, remove all the contamination that was required per our record of decision. Our craftspeople are amazing. The people that went out there in the heavy equipment, because we would go to them and we'd say, okay, here's this spot that you've got to clean up. And they were so precise. They could go to these little areas and they could, dig out a small box of contamination. And box, I mean, just like a square in the ground. I couldn't have done it. And just their talent with being able to chase the contamination within a small area is just astounding. They're really great. And I cannot say how much I appreciate everybody that took part in all the soil remediation. I know buildings coming down is really difficult, but watching them and all the things that they had to do just to remove the soil I was so super impressed. The document that we had a record of decision document that kind of defined our cleanup boundaries, if you will, like what our remedial action limits were and what we needed to clean up towards. So we would go out and we would basically, once we had our contamination bounded to an area, we would chase it until we knew we had reached clean samples and we had confirmed that we had gotten all the contamination in an area. So you did your characterization, then you went out and you bound your contamination to an area, and then you confirmed that you had gotten everything. And so that's essentially the process. And the waste goes to specific waste disposal areas based on what the contamination was.
The celebration marking the completion of Vision 2024. Tell us about that. You're inviting some special guests to the site, and I understand EPA is giving you an award. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah. So EPA I think it was June, issued an award to Oak Ridge for the annual Federal Facility Excellence in Site Reuse. And so they're going to be coming into town and giving DOE or OREM that award during the Vision 2024 celebration, because part of our cleanup process has really been to not only remove sources to groundwater contamination, but also turn the site over for beneficial reuse in the future. And we've been really successful with that. So that's part of that celebration. We also have representatives from state and local offices coming, and there will be a lot of speeches going on. And it's just a great collaboration of all these entities that work together to help make this come to fruition.
One of the goals of cleanup, and you've already referred to this, was related to public safety and risk reduction, but another major focus was transferring the cleaned up land to the community for use and economic development purposes. How much land has been transferred to the community at this point, and how is it being used? How's the community using it to boost the economy?
As of right now, we've transferred a little over 1,700, about 1,760 acres of property to the community. And that went actually to our community reuse organization of East Tennessee. And we have a little bit, we had about 2,000 acres total at ETTP that we're working with. So that difference will be going to the Industrial Development Board later. We still have quite a bit that we're trying to transfer. ProET has facilitated a lot of different owners coming in. And so I think there was a recent announcement made by Kairos. They broke ground in their construction of the property that they acquired. And so it just, as far as how the community is benefiting, it's just starting right now. So the property has been transferred to future landowners, and they're just at the baby stages of coming in and turning the site over for the next stage of what it's going to become. OREM is out on site working on a viewing platform as part of the National Historic Park. And so that's changing the horizon a little bit. And along with Kairos, those two construction projects are really making things just snap, if you will. And it's exciting because it's showing, we took the buildings down, we removed the soil, and now things are going back up again. So it's this exciting cycle of change as the site is reused.
One of the main uses of the transferred land, as far as economic development goes, there's been a lot of interest by nuclear-related companies that like the idea of being close to Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and also being in a community that's supportive of nuclear energy the way Oak Ridge is. What's been happening on site in terms of companies showing that interest and possibly locating facilities there?
So I mentioned earlier that Kairos broke ground on their facility. And so they're one of the major fourth generation nuclear reactors. I think the first one of its kind right now that has started construction. And we have other businesses that are expressing interest because Kairos has started, and I mentioned that we've got our viewing platform going up. So there's this horizon change that I talked about. And so I think that businesses that have expressed interest in ETTP are becoming even more interested in starting their construction processes, because they're seeing that, we're done with the soil remediation and it's time to start moving on to the next phase of ETTP, which is it's a huge benefit to the local Oak Ridge community and the surrounding counties, because it creates a lot of jobs. And as you mentioned, there's a population here that's very supportive of nuclear, if there happens to be nuclear, but anything. I think everybody's just really excited for the change that's happening.
historic preservation is one of the important elements of the revitalization of the ETTP site. And you mentioned the viewing platform for the K25 footprint. The K25 footprint is part of the national park, the Manhattan Project National Park, and this is something that connects Hanford and Los Alamos across the country for visitors to get a really good picture of the history of the Manhattan Project and what occurred there. Tell us about the viewing platform and about the importance of historic preservation in the total cleanup and revitalization program.
So we've been working with a lot of different stakeholders on the National Historic Park, and this viewing platform was part of an agreement that we reached with our stakeholders to support all the men and the women and all the efforts that went into the Manhattan Project. And so K25 was this huge gaseous diffusion facility, and it was the largest of its kind at the time. And we were unable to save the building in its entirety due to, contamination. But we have the footprint, and to really appreciate the footprint, you kind of need to go vertical so that you can look down upon it. And so that's the intent of this viewing platform. And the location of the viewing platform is in proximity to the current K25 History Museum. And so they kind of tie in together, and visitors will be able to go to the museum and then go up into this viewing platform and appreciate just the enormity of what was done back in 1943, 1945. It was an amazing process. We here at OREM, we like to talk about how quickly they were able to build that facility and how long it's taken us to clean up after it. Mm-hmm. It's a big difference.
Quite a bit of difference, a few years versus decades.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you have, in addition to the industrial park and the historic preservation, there's also a conservation component to the site where you're setting aside some land for conservation purposes. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So we have about 3,000 acres in the Black Oak Ridge Conservation Easement that we are working with TWRA to transfer. And that's really exciting because it's one of the largest contiguous forested tracts in the Oak Ridge area. So there's a lot of just wildlife and opportunities for people that want to get out and walk or bike. There's a lot of, endangered species in the area. It's an exciting, beautiful tract of land that is sort of in the background of ETTP.
Most people who look at what's happening at the East Tennessee Technology Park today are very impressed with the progress and the good things that are happening there through economic development, historic preservation, and conservation. These things were all possible because the site has been cleaned up. Can you talk about the importance of cleanup, environmental cleanup overall, as it relates to being able to reuse this land? It would not have been possible without the environmental cleanup, and how this will be important for Oak Ridge in the future, and maybe for other DOE sites around the country who can do similar things in the way of beneficial reuse.
Yeah. So when we started our cleanup process, as you said, it's been decades of just cleaning up, starting with the buildings, moving to the soil, doing high-risk projects first. Our biggest priorities are protecting human health and the environment. And so we are out there working with EPA and TDEC to return this site back to the community through whatever mechanisms we can for beneficial reuse and future reindustrialization. As a whole, there are many sites across the United States where we have done similar things, where we've done a lot of cleanup and returned the site to reuse. There's like Rocky Flats, there's Fernald. And so ETTP is, I think, one of the first where it is becoming a business park, if you will, plus you'll have a museum in the center of it. So it's not just a conservation easement. It's not just a preserve. It's going to be many different facets that are happening at the same time. And so once we are done, and once you start seeing more businesses coming in and a viewing platform in the National Historic Museum, National Historic Park set up, it's just going to be a complete game changer. And ETTP, I think, would be put on the map because of all this interconnectedness and, change and evolution from what it was to what it is now.
Well, these kind of massive jobs couldn't be accomplished successfully without some kind of a partnership or close working relationship with your regulators, the regulatory bodies, which you have both state and federal with the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation and EPA. I'm assuming that part went well, that you did have a good partnership, and that helped speed the cleanup and make it possible. I gauge that on the fact that EPA gave you an award, so you must have had a good working relationship with the regulators during this process.
Yeah, I would say so. It's been a very collaborative effort. They've been engaged all the way through. And it's just been, honestly, it's been a joy to work with, talented people. And we're all aiming towards the same goal. We all want to protect the environment and human health, right? So that's what's nice, is that we all know we have the same goal in mind, and we just have to get there together. And we've been able to do that.
Now, once the soil remediation is completed, which it is now substantially, you still have a groundwater monitoring program going on, and that's gonna be going on for a while, right?
Yeah. So we recently, we had two very historical moments. We got two groundwater rods approved by EPA and TDEC, which is
a rod being a record of decision.
Record of decision, yes. Excuse me. We had two groundwater record of decisions that were approved and agreed to by EPA, TDEC, and OREM. And that's historic because they're the first ones for Oak Ridge. And it was the first one that we've had here in a long time that we didn't have to go through extensive negotiations to get them finalized. We were able to collaborate and come together to have agreement on them. And so going forward, you asked about groundwater monitoring, and that is a long-term thing. It will be something that we do for many decades.
Based on the completion of these various visions, Vision 2020 and Vision 2024, what is your message to the community, to community leaders, in terms of DOE's commitment and the importance of this environmental cleanup effort to the community, and what it can mean for the future of Oak Ridge? Is there some message you can leave us with for the community leaders?
Since I've joined this organization, it's been really exciting because I think we're really trying to collaborate together and return this site over to the community so that they can have it back and start a new future with it. So I would say the message is basically, we want to be good neighbors. We want to work with you. We want to return things back to you into the community, and continue to meet our mission and priority goals. We want to protect human health and the environment, and continue to just start a new future here in Oak Ridge.
Well, Joanna Hardin, Portfolio Federal Project Director for the East Tennessee Technology Park, thank you very much for being with us on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Funding for the Gone Fission Nuclear Report is provided by the Energy Communities Alliance.